in there. Nothing to write home about.
Now you're right face to face.
I can't hear you. Give Sandy a couple minutes, she may not be able to come. Apologize for me not being here last week, I could not. I couldn't move, I couldn't more, I just had to sit.
Feel better?
Yeah. It's been, I'm gonna tell you, last 2 months. It just comes and goes, horrible. The kids at school already know. If I say I gotta sit down, I gotta sit down. And, they're pretty good about it. They just kind of leave me alone. Even the bad ones, they keep working. Oh, goodness. Can't decide if this heat helps in here or not. It's kind of cold right here.
It's cold down on my feet, but up at my head, it's starting to get.
I think if you were standing this high, it's really hot up there. I think we need to do some re-engineering of some airflow.
You would think though with the fans.
It would help. Let me turn yours on really low. All of them on really low, see what that does.
Are these the kind that you can change?
The direction?
Uh-huh.
Right, they're in the right direction now.
Going down?
Yeah. Well, I saw Kelly today. Not today. Yesterday or the day before. He was eating by himself.
Oh,
Because they have a seating chart for the lunchroom
everybody with that.
for COVID. And he's talking for some reason, Kelly, you know your grandson. His permanent seat is with 3 very pretty girls.
Yeah.
Every day. And he was sitting all by himself. I said, you never sit by yourself. He said, I had to. Everybody's on quarantine. All the girls are on quarantine. Just sitting there eating all by himself. I was just sorry for him.
He's been that way since he could walk.
Really?
He just, well, he's a people person, obviously, but
He's a player.
he would go and he would walk up to these really cute women and he would carry on a conversation. He's this big and they're this, and they'd sit down on sidewalks and stuff and just talk to him because he just was that way. And he could never meet a stranger.
Yes.
We feared that because he was cute.
Uh-huh.
He was a little fat, blonde-headed baby,
Still is.
blue eyes.
Mhm.
And people would pick him up.
Mhm.
We really did worry that he would not sound an alarm.
Mhm.
So several places did come and get him and take him because they lived in South Miami. So a lot of Mexicans and Haitians and stuff, and they all wanted to see the little chunky baby.
Well, so does one of the girls.
They does.
His kids I like him a lot. I never taught him.
I know, I think he told me he took it an odd time or something in your class, and he said he didn't think he would have you.
Yeah, I teach world history now. See, I taught American government in 9th grade. And they really liked it. And it's needed right now because I can tell
I think it's needed more than ever.
by even adults, and even our congressmen, it's obvious nobody knows the Constitution. And you know as well as I do, the Constitution is not very long. It's very short. And it's easy to read. There's a little bit of 1700 language in there, you know. Like for representatives, it's saying every other year, it says every second year. But, you know, it's pretty cut and dry and very, very I would spend,
and so important.
I'd spend a week on the first three articles. First one is the legislative branch of government, second is the presidency, and third one is the judicial, of course. But the reason I spent a week is not because it's that difficult, it's because I wanted to see what the implications were from our history. You know, I wanted to see, so they'd see what happened at the presidency or with Senate or the House of Representatives in the past and the Supreme Court. And then there's 7 articles, but articles 4 through 7 are so short, like a paragraph long. I do them all in a week, you know, just real quick. And then we get into the Bill of Rights. That takes forever because the first 10 amendments, I brought up court cases that have to read and discuss their opinion on it, you know. Usually got in trouble with the board. We got the Second Amendment because I had all these kids looking at guns and explosives and all this kind of stuff, which is in there, you know, and that's part of the Supreme Court decisions. But it's, even our elected officials have never read the Constitution, I don't think.
I don't think.
It's an uncalculated code. You know?
I have a lifelong friend that he was retired coach, and he taught history and civics, and he wrote a thing recently, and we need to allocate more time and more money to doing this type of thing with the history and the government, Constitution, and I don't think it'll happen. I just, people don't think it's.
Actually, my class used to be called civics.
Yeah.
And it was 9 weeks long. Now it's entire credit. It's a whole semester long. And I mean, you had kids. I had parents call me and said, "You're teaching that radical stuff." And I said, "No, this is what the Constitution says." And I'd read it to them on the phone and say, "I did not realize what the Constitution says." I said, "Nobody does." You know.
I'm surprised that nobody has the curiosity to know when they think they know.
I think it's like the Bible.
I can't tell you how many people say, "Why do you need a larger gun to kill a deer?" And say they think that's what that amendment, or you just, I don't even catch on.
It's the kids are saying, "We don't like this politician." Why? Because he's going to take everyone's guns away. I said, "There's nobody in America that can do that. You're not allowed. If the Constitution says you have a right to bear arms." I said, "No politician, I don't care what they say, can do it, no matter what. Don't worry about that." The way we try to limit that ability is by what they can have, who gets it, and where they can carry it. So now then we can do that.
Definition.
Yeah.
Wow.
Who can buy it, when they can, and what they can buy it for.
But they don't catch on to the reason behind it. So it's never been, that would have been so ridiculous a thought at that time. But nobody, I can't tell you how many people have complained about that in the last couple of years, especially with
You're supposed to.
NRA.
Well, I mean, the original amendment is probably not necessary, but because that was the days when we were protected by militia, you know, by local militia that were paid. But it still applies. We don't have militia anymore. But the reason we have the right to bear arms is to kill people, you know, not animals. And that's the reason why it says we have to have it. We better get started with him. Dad, do this one prayer, please?
Yes. Our Lord, most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you once again for this privilege we have to study your word, have fellowship with one another. We ask you to help us to understand what we study, that we take it with us, and we tell others about it. Be with us now as we go through this service. not only through this service, but all through our lives. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, we're into Matthew 7 now. We just finished 6 about not being anxious about anything. Now, chapter 7 begins, in fact, 1 through 6. My Bible divides it into two paragraphs. It probably needs to be. One paragraph, 1 through 5, and 6 all by itself. But it is this passage here where Jesus is teaching in the Sermon on the Mount that you, number one, realize that Jesus is a master teacher who can take a very complicated biblical idea, theological idea, and put it very simply. What Jesus uses, I was going to get people to guess, but there's not many of us here. I mean, it's Sunday morning, but what technique is used here? And the technique that's used in 1 through 5 is he is telling a joke. He's using humor. And yet, I've heard this read so seriously in the past. And as a young man, as a kid and a young man, I wondered why Jesus would put it this way, because it seems kind of silly. And then I finally realized, and I realized by seeing a portrayal of this event on television, and the actor who was portraying Jesus, he had the people in stitches with this, because it is funny. It's a visual, absurd situation. Teaching a huge, big theological concept. All right, verse 1, do not judge so that you will not be judged. Very self-explanatory. We'll talk about it after a while. But I want to prove what I'm saying. For in the way you judge, you will be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Again, volumes. So how do you relate that? Well, then he goes on and says, why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and look, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Now, the King James Bible doesn't use speck and log, it uses mote and beam. And I think we probably got caught up on those because we don't really use those this way anymore, except for beam. He does the same thing when he gives Peter the keys to the kingdom. When he says, you are Peter, but upon this rock I will build my church. But that's just a joke in Greek. You are Peter, which is a little pebble, but upon this great big boulder will I build my church. In this case, I can even see Jesus making hand motions and stuff and say, look what you're trying to do, you know? And I can see people laughing at the very absurd idea. Don't look for a tiny little speck in your brother's eye. You know, don't judge him for having a speck in his eye. When you've got a huge, big tree trunk of a log in your own eye. You say, can you imagine that? You try to help somebody else in their life. Well, you're carrying around a huge, big beam in your eye. The whole idea is absurd. There's no way to do it. And he's using something that is relatable to all of us. If I ever get something in my eye, everything else stops. I'll get up out of bed to get it out of my eye. They make drops now for you if you have something in your eye, because they know it's going to bother you. You get something in your eye. That's the only reason I miss glasses. You know, wearing glasses, because I had that surgery, is because less got in my eye. You know, if I get something in my eye that just bothers the stew out of me,
And also, I hate anything to be wrong with my eye at all. I'll go to the doctor for that quicker than just about anything else. Because it's aggravating. And this is what Jesus is saying. He says, what you got to do is imagine two different people. One has got a little speck in his eye that's irritating. But the guy that's going to help him has a huge, big timber in his eye, which is impossible. But you get the idea. Jesus is using humor. He's using absurdity. I can even see him hacking it out. You know, how in the world are you going to get this big beam out of your eye? He's teaching a very important thing. And what he's teaching is found in verses 1 and 2. Do not judge, so that you won't be judged. In the way you judge, you will be judged. By your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. I remember the old saying in the church that they don't use anymore, that when you point at somebody else, you got three fingers pointing right back at you. Be very careful when you judge. Do not judge other people. And if you do, and I don't think he's saying that this is okay, but if you do, make sure that there's nothing in your own life that somebody could judge you for. I think what he's actually saying is don't judge others when you've got problems yourself that you need to work on. Now let me ask you a hard question about this. Has religion, or has Christianity learned this lesson from Jesus in all these centuries?
No.
Do we refrain from judging others? Do we as churches and as Christians, do we refrain from judging others? No. In fact, and I'm sorry to say, that religious people are known to do this. And this is why a lot of people don't want anything to do with religion. I myself have had to, for many years, preach this very same thing here. And to be honest with you, it's one of the things I think I've done a pretty good job on here, because we don't seem to do it near as much, if at all, as we did when I first got here. That used to be the hallmark of a Christian. Everywhere. I can judge better than you can judge. Now, Jesus was experiencing this very same thing. The people of his day were experiencing the very same thing. It was way more out in the open than it is now, though. Way more official. The scribes, Pharisees, just to put it bluntly, the Sanhedrin, did this. They made a very, very big deal out of judging other people. But everybody knew. Everybody, Jesus knew, obviously, because he knew everything, but even all the people knew. Why do you think that so many people, by the tens of thousands, were flocking after John the Baptist and later flocking after Jesus? They were sick of what they had. They were sick of what they had. John the Baptist and Jesus were what we would call politically revolutionaries. These were individuals that did not really advocate the overthrow of their government, but they did point out the flaws in their government. Because the Sanhedrin, while very, very quick to judge everybody, were very corrupt themselves. And the Sanhedrin was the religious leaders, but they were also the political leaders of the area. And the people were sick of this. They were sick of the Romans. They were sick of the Greeks before them. And they were sick of their own religious leaders. Because these people were corrupt. They would take bribes. Everything they judged other people for, they would do it, but they would get away with it because of who they were. People were sick and tired of it. This was the perfect time for John the Baptist to come. This was the perfect time for Jesus to come. And Jesus just lets it, and I can imagine, here we are applying this to us, but look at what was happening in Jesus' day when he said it for the first time. He is telling all these people, you're not supposed to do that. Not only are you not supposed to do that, our teachers, our rulers, they're not supposed to do it either. They're not supposed to judge you and then do the same things themselves. Religiously today, we still do it. Ray Stevens. I grew up listening to Ray Stevens making fun of every part of our society. I have a favorite song. It's about religion. I won't mention it. Yeah, well, it's the Do-Right Family. I love that song because I can remember those groups when I was younger. But he has a song that I think he meant to be funny, but it's not. It said it doesn't make me laugh at all because it's something I'm very, very upset with about religion today. Would Jesus wear a Rolex on his television show? Would his wife wear furs and diamonds? Would his dressing room have a star? I can't say the whole lyrics. I don't listen to it that often because it doesn't make me happy at all. Like the rest of his songs do, they all make me happy, but that one don't. The rest of them are funny, except for Everything is Beautiful in its own way. That was not meant to be funny, but I'm digressing a little bit. My favorite line from that song, though, is he's talking about a televangelist for the Rolex. He said, would Jesus ask me for a 20 with 10,000 on his arm? I'm not doing good with my money. I'm too greedy. I need to give it to you, but you've got $10,000 on your arm. It's not right. And he's right.
Look how many people believe that today.
And the reason
Millions.
that those people have so much money is because it works. Yeah.
Years ago, when I was going to the Pentecostal church there in Missouri, we had a friend of our preacher came and preached a revival. He drove a Cadillac convertible.
Mhm.
And you just hear everybody talking about him driving a Cadillac convertible. And there wasn't any money back in the books to make anyway, preaching or anything else like that. But about 2 or 3 years later, he came back and preached another lesson. One driving the Cadillac. And we asked him, what happened? And he said, people weren't listening to me. That I could preach a sermon and they wouldn't listen to me. All they could see was me driving a Cadillac out there. So that was my joy, driving that thing. So I just really enjoyed it. But said I couldn't because it made my sermons useful. So he sold his Cadillac and got it. I don't know if it was a Ford or a Chevrolet. One or the other.
But wonderfully recognized it.
Yeah.
He didn't stay on that path of more money.
Yeah, but by the same token, and I know the people he's talking about, he's talking about, they're very poor people. But why did they judge him for having that talent? Why was that such a bad idea? Why was that so horrible for him to have it to them?
It wasn't. It just
The excitement of it was probably right.
yeah, it was something that gave him joy outside of this. Being a Pentecostal preacher sometimes is a hard.
Any kind of a preacher, you ain't gonna make no money anymore if you're actually doing it right. That's not my question. My question is, why would the church people not listen to his sermons?
They were jealous.
Because they wanted what he had. And if they had an opportunity, they would have it. And therefore, he was wrong because he had it and they didn't, right?
And we innovate too much.
What if, and again, it sounds like what you're saying, but it may not be. What if this guy had a Cadillac and nothing else?
Like what we had.
What if he had the money to get that cheaply and was able to go to these revivals with that Cadillac and maybe even have to sleep in it from time to time? Because one thing I remember about an old Cadillac is that they're big. They're huge. And, you know, what if that's what he just loved to do, is to travel around preaching, and he wanted to do it comfortably, and he sacrificed everything else for that?
The fact that he gave it up because he recognized it says that was his reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see the Joel Osteens and stuff on TV, and they don't give it up.
No.
And they go into it knowing the psychology of getting the money and stuff like that. But the fact that he gave it up says to me that was his reason.
Yeah.
He liked to get it.
He liked it, he enjoyed it, but maybe he had nothing else.
Yeah.
You know, there was a time when I had, and I never heard anybody say anything, I had a huge, big Class A motorhome out back here, making payments on it, and it was not near as nice as everybody thought it was. I did a lot of work on the inside, customized it, which meant taking a lot of stuff out. Dad built some stuff to put stuff in so that I could use it as an office, and you know, and I took out the big double bed, and twin beds. I have room for a washer and dryer around the house, stuff like that. They're very small ones, but I still have that part. But you gotta understand, it was all I had. I mean, I just like to go camping. I like to travel. And that was all I had. I didn't have nothing else. I didn't have a nice big fancy home. I didn't have any possessions inside it. I still don't. But I did have that big old motorhome outside that I got a good deal on from Dick Gorge. And I made payments on it, so it was mine. You know, but that's what I wanted. You know, that's what I enjoyed, but that was all I had. Then other people who could have judged me had nice brick homes, you know, would go on vacations to, you know, places and resorts and stuff, or hotels cost money, and I would just go. Sometimes, on the way, I would always try to stay in a campground that was kind of nice when I got there, but sometimes I just, you know, park in a Walmart lot and sleep there. So the thing is, I see maybe a problem that he had it, but I also see a problem in the church people that judge him for it. And once he got rid of the Cadillac and got a regular old Ford, Chevy, whatever everybody else had, does that mean he had any less money than he had before? I mean,
Other than having a home.
yeah. I mean, probably have the same amount, you know, it's just, now you don't know it. I gotta hide that. And you're right. And Joel wasn't the first guy to do it. The first people that made the news with it was Jim and Tammy.
Well, Oral Roberts.
He did it for a long, long time.
Well, I have a different opinion of him than everybody else because he was like that man. When he woke up to something, he tried to correct it.
Mm-hmm.
He gave his books away when he realized, you know, but, you know.
Well, I'm not going to judge.
It just is, I think it goes along with people are worried.
He did cause a lot of controversy in religion.
Sure.
But not as much as Jim and Tammy at Area USA. Come on. asking poor people for money and getting solid gold dog houses. No.
They're even better at it now. My friend liked Kenneth Copeland
Mhm,
and some faith healer.
mhm.
I want to say his name was Barry or something, or Barry. I don't remember, but so I watched them because she wanted my opinion. And you really don't have but one standard. If they think they're prophetic and they make a mistake,
Mhm.
they're not prophets.
Yeah.
And she would come and go with it because she really did like the angle of TV.
Mhm.
And it didn't matter. She knew. She came from a point where she knew,
Mhm.
and we discussed it, but she got mad at me for saying it. Not because it was wrong,
Mhm.
but that's all you can do. You have one standard,
Mhm.
and we go by the word. And that's pretty much it. But if you're worried to complain about somebody,
Mhm.
you're worried about your life.
Right, and this was something that was brought to me in Kentucky by a guy down last that I didn't care for. And he created more problems for me when I was preaching there. But he knew some of the Bible very well, and others he didn't really know. However, I digress. He had this thing that I think was perfectly right, and I can't get anybody to see that. To say that there is a man that we have who's preaching, whoever it is, and there is a message that he is preaching. How close is the man and the message? Or how close are the man and the message to each other? If the man preaches the message and he preaches the truth, and then later we find out that he's not living it, does that make the message that he preached?
No.
You see what I'm saying? Now, this is what happened personally to us in Daytona when I was growing up. I can't remember the man's name, so I'm not tempted to, I do now, but I'm not gonna say it. I don't know where he is now. He held a meeting, and we were big on gospel meetings in Daytona. He held a meeting, and from what I knew of the Bible at the time, I was in my late teens. I didn't know, I hadn't studied near as much as now, but it seemed to be pretty on target. Did I like him? I never got to know him. I shook his hand one time. I was introduced to him. That was it. Okay. What he said, strictly the truth. He left us and went home. And what we did is not only would we have the gospel meeting, but we'd schedule another gospel meeting for like 5 years down the road, so we could get them back. And they did that, and then about a year later, we were told that his meeting had been canceled. He wasn't coming back. The reason being, well, Joey came back, but I was seeing who's lying because I don't know. The reason being is that when he went home, his wife came back from the gynecologist, and she had an STD, a sexually transmitted disease. Turns out he's been cheating on her for a couple of decades, and she never found out until then. Without knowing his name and looking at it as a hypothetical situation, was he a good man? No. Okay. Does that take anything away from the message that he preached?
It takes away the trust of the people that hear it.
Not what I'm talking about. Does it take anything away from the message that he preached? God has many times chosen some imperfect people to carry his message. Jonah being one,
And
Balaam being another one,
David, yeah.
David, who cheated on his wife many times, okay? Cheated on other men's wives many times. So, I mean, does that mean that David was no longer a man after God's own heart? No, because that's been said about him after that happened. God says it about him. So, and this is something that I fully believe in, because I do not want that kind of responsibility as a preacher, where not only my life has to be perfect outside and inside, I don't know if it can be, but I can at least make sure that what I say is the truth. But I can sure make sure that what I say is the truth. And what you were talking about with Kent Copeland, listen to him. If he's wrong, he's wrong. If he's right, he's right.
What has struck me in the last few months is reading, and right now I'm in Luke, when they say, should we run these people off because they're preaching and
Right.
driving out devils and stuff like that, and he says very plainly, and I've never paid attention to it until recently, that whoever's not against me is for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And he says, leave them alone.
and how many people in the church take that as something that they do? He who's not against me is with me. Leave them alone.
Leave them alone. And that's was kind of an eye-opener to me, but he said, leave them alone.
Well, when you come right down to it, leave them alone. It's about all you can do. Because at least they're trying. At least they're trying to do the right thing. They may not be, but at least they're trying. But if you do anything, they're going to quit trying.
And it also sort of to me says it's up to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's saying, it's up to me, not you.
Mm-hmm. It's leave those people alone. And I have seen people who have actually been part of a religious organization that they consider to be in error, that the reason they consider to be in error is because of stuff they've read. They've asked me questions before, and I've known better than to look at their church and say, oh, you're part of this church, so they teach this and that's wrong. No, better than that, they ask questions. I don't even answer the question. I give them where to look. Sometimes it requires me to look on my computer or look at my Bible or look at my concordance to find it, but I don't look at this. Does this answer your question? Because I've known for a long time, people are part of the church and they have trouble divorcing the man from the message. And here's a man that they very much admire and respect, and there's absolutely no reason to do so. Let me use a mundane illustration. A personal hero of mine, at least he was, and I guess he still is, because I used to, and probably still do, really love the game of football. When I started getting into it and coaching it, I wound up reading and learning a lot that was invented by one man, by one football coach. And that was Paul Bryant, known only better as Bear Bryant of the University of Alabama. The man was an absolute genius when it came to the game. We still today use the terminology and the strategies and the things that he invented. He invented the language that we use in football because he knew the game. I don't know how he did it, because the only way he could have done it was he could imagine everything in his mind and he could put it all together and make it work.
I looked at Joe Namath's commercial. The guy has hands for a football.
Mm-hmm.
His curvature is everything. So
Even in his
the people that have those type of abilities
the problem with
born to it.
Coach Bryant was that he was a genius as a football coach, but a somewhat less than marginal human being.
Yeah.
Now, I did not even know that he coached, I should have, anywhere before Alabama, because he was there forever throughout my childhood. when he was the head coach at Texas A&M. And I watched the documentary, Year of the Junction Boys. He killed a kid. Okay? He didn't mean to, but he killed him. Took him out in the desert of West Texas. The first thing he had to do was dig cactuses out of the practice field. And he kept those kids out there working like dogs with no water. The one kid had to be rushed to the hospital and he died. And you might as well say Coach Bryant killed that kid because that's what he was trying to do. He didn't know the repercussions. Did he know what was going to happen? I doubt it, or he wouldn't have done it. But he did do it. And from what I can understand and what I've read outside that documentary, because I really was upset. I wanted it not to be true, but I looked it up and sure enough, it is true. And what would happen is those kids would be thirsty at night, trying to sleep in that heat. And he and the other coaches would be drinking plenty of water and plenty of bourbon too, all night long. I think he learned something from that, but there's nothing that gets away from he did kill that young man, that athlete. So, but I have to hasten to point out, he wasn't that great of a human being, but we still use the stuff that he created in football because it is absolutely wonderful. And it's a genius level. You take that to the church, I have learned some huge things. Men have asked me to consider, and I have, and I've changed my mind, or I've learned things a lot better from some guys that later turned out to be not that great of a person after all. So what does that mean? What they said was wrong? When Jesus died, he left the preaching of the gospel in what the Bible calls earthen vessels, in the hands of imperfect men. And I believe that what these imperfect people are supposed to do is to discuss and to study with people with them who discuss and study and learn and help each other get the way. It's kind of like the premise, and I think George Washington, he's the one that said, to try to govern without God is absolutely ludicrous. I think that's the whole purpose. People have said all of that, this insurrection thing is completely out of what I'm talking about. But all of this stuff, senators arguing, representatives arguing, looking, and even having 9 people on the Supreme Court is a part of our nation that we should hold to. The very fact that they argue and fuss and argue about these things is exactly what our forefathers had. Today, I don't think in the church we should argue and fuss, but I do think we should discuss, and I think we should disagree without being disagreeable. But when we disagree about things, we need to show people why they're wrong, or show people why they're right, or show people why we think we're right, and discuss them, and go back and forth. And I think that you can probably disagree with people without being disagreeable and hateful. You can disagree with them, be nice and kind, and if you're trying to get to the truth, I think that's what our forefathers in the Constitution had to do, the Supreme Court. There've been many different numbers. Sometimes there was 5, sometimes there was more than 9, sometimes there was less than 9. It doesn't really matter. They're supposed to come together after they hear a case, and they're supposed to discuss it agreeably. Well, I think that's what we're supposed to do. And I think the more people that are involved in this, the more close you're going to get to the truth. Unless those people have an ulterior motive and an alternate agenda.
But oftentimes in discussion that shows its face.
Mm-hmm.
I find, having been to quite a few, the Church of Christ reminds me of Jesus' time.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they know.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not willing to discuss kindly. in a general rule. You know, not everybody, not all the time, but certain aspects of it are written in stone.
which should never happen, in my opinion now. But I don't think, and this is partly.
But I do see it because I've been around
You probably heard me
here
say
and
this.
yonder, you know, I didn't get to just go, we moved.
Mhm.
Once land got up, you know, we moved for years at a time and going to the different ones. Rarely do you see people happy though about it.
Mhm.
If it's written in stone, they want the opportunity to show you your incorrectness.
Right. And
That's a different
instead,
motive, that's a total different
What-
motive than
what
wanting to know
we-
the truth.
what we were founded on, at least here in this country, and from what Rose and Roland say, or what Roland says about the Restoration Movement in Europe, the whole idea is not founded in stone. And this is an old, in fact, this method of teaching I just talked about today is older than Christianity. It's called the Socratic method. It was invented by Socrates.
Yeah,
This asking questions and receiving logical, reasonable, text-based answers is part. If people are wrong, that's great. Okay? If people are wrong, that's great. If they have a question, that's fantastic. But we shouldn't be answering them with anything but the scriptures, and what we've chosen in religion to answer them with is two answers. We've never done that before, or we've always done it this way. And those two answers are absolutely useless. They cut off discussion, they cut off reasoning, they cut off logic, because it doesn't make sense. Okay, it doesn't make sense. And again, this is not just religion, and it's not just politics. It's education.
Yeah.
We have a saying in education, two of them. One of them is, if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always got, and that's not good enough. And the other one is the one I like even more. When the horse dies, stop riding it. Okay? When you're shown that it's dead, don't go out and develop new strategies for riding a dead horse. Okay? Don't go out and try to beat the horse to make it get up because it's dead. You know? Which is what we do all the time. And in churches, that's what we do. There was, and again, I'm not going to say how I feel about this, but I just want to introduce you something. There's a guy who is a pariah in the church right now. He used to be a professor at David Lipscomb, and he did not like what he saw in Church of Christ. Quite frankly, I don't blame him. He is in, I want to say Arizona, but I'm not sure now. And he saw what you saw, the stigma of the name Church of Christ. So he formed a group of members of the Church of Christ. Instead of putting that name on the sign outside, he just simply calls it the church. That's it. The church at, and he mentions the city that is in, I would mention it, but I don't know what it is. I can't remember. Which, by the way, is the most mentioned name for the church in the Bible, in Testament. It's called the church at Smyrna, the church at Thessalonica, the church at Philippi, and stuff like that. It's just called the church. The church. That's what he calls it, the church. I think it's more important to put the in front of it than more than anything else. But the church. Well, guess what I saw written as soon as he did it? And still, you can't do that. Why? Because we've never done that before. I'm not saying I'm not saying that he was right. I'm not saying that what he did was correct, and I'm not saying it's incorrect either. I'm still trying to make up my mind. But the reasoning that's been given is basically That's not a good enough reason to change what your sign says. And that's not, all that means is we've never done it that way before. That's all it means. And we ought to be willing, and the church needs to have leaders in it who are willing to consider and have an open mind. Because if you tell us something where we're actually wrong and not following scripture, you're actually the best person that we have in our lives. Because, you know, someone once told me this, and it's happened to other preachers that told me. I was teaching a class in Christian evidences. You know, what proof is there outside the Bible that there is a God? There's a bunch of them. But what always happens in those things is that an argument breaks out, which is good. You know, it needs to. Because at least people are thinking. One young lady told me, and I don't even remember if I was arguing the right way or the wrong way, because I would argue both sides to keep the discussion going. She got mad at me, and she said, "You always think you're right, don't you?" Well, again, and since she's not here, I will use this language. That's one of the stupidest things anybody's ever said to me. Because the answer is yes. I do always think I'm right.
I always think I'm right.
I always think I'm
Until
right.
I'm wrong.
If I thought I was wrong, I would change. You know, it would be stupid for me to continue to do something that I thought was wrong.
I had somebody tell me that this week, so.
You always think you're right, don't you? Well, of course I do. If I thought I was wrong, I'd change. But it does not mean I won't listen to you.
Exactly.
But now, just because now on the other side, this part that I don't think you should be either. On the other side is I'm not going to change just because you say that I should. You know? Just because you think of it. And again, we do that in church. If I was to preach something new, one of two things would happen. This comes from David saying he's completely right. If I was to preach something new, somebody would accept it and say, well, he's a preacher, he must know what he's talking about. Or they would reject it and say, that's just not the way I've always thought about that. And both those answers are exactly the same. They're useless. Those have nothing to do with the way we should answer it. It's something that I think is wrong with not only the church, but all organized religion. It's just too much tradition and too much. We've always done it that way, or we've never done it that way before. And not enough, let's get to the Bible and read and see. And if we're wrong, let's change. And what this guy did, I know it's out west, or it was, what this guy did by building a building and putting the church out front of it, to me, it's a little bit more important what they do inside that building in the terms of worship and in terms of how they behave as a church and what ministries they're involved in. That's way more important than the name on the sign. What would you do, I'll say this not much, if you went to Germany and the church there is called Gemeindepriest? And that doesn't mean Church of Christ, but that does mean what the word church does mean, because it's really not a word that is religious in the Bible. It means a small, close, personal society with the same goal in mind of Christ. I like that because it's a big psychological term. Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. The Germans invented, so we're stuck with those names. But Gemein is your small organizations that are designed for the same purpose, small group of people. Gesell is like the United States of America. It's a very loosely bound, large group of people that everybody feels a part of, and everybody kind of sort of is going in the same way. You know, the Gemeinschaft is a very small, it would be like a Senate committee, you know, a small group for one specific goal, which we're going to see a lot of with the confirmation hearings, it's coming up. Very small group, but the whole Senate would be the Gesell.
Yeah.
So I think Gemeindepriest is actually a cool name for the church that you find in Germany. I'll quit. Start here. I didn't get the pigs and dogs, which I kind of, that's funny too, I mean, but Um, Now, oh, Charles is here, he got pigs. Anyhow, what's your patient's on?
80.
8-0. All right, we'll sing a verse of 8-0. So if anybody here feels like they need to, and especially those of you at home feel like they need to make a change, go ahead and make a change. I mean, our contact information is on the website, and be more than welcome to answer your, every chance to check my email. All right, and together we stand and we sing.
I stand
Amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned unclean. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. Shall we pray? Almighty God and Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for all our many blessings. We ask, Heavenly Father, thy blessings upon this congregation, upon this community. We begin a new chapter in our lives as a nation today, Heavenly Father. We pray for our new leaders, and we pray that everyone understands that their success means our success. We ask, Heavenly Father, to continue to live in a nation that's free, in a nation where people are free to study your word, to worship you unmolested. We ask you to continue to care for each and every one of us, Father. In the name of Christ that we pray. Amen. And I do believe that. I said the same thing for the last administration. I said the same thing for this one. Their success means our success.
It certainly does.
And I think we need to put aside whatever partisan differences. We've gotten so horrible here in the past couple of years. Just have whatever partisan differences or differences that we have and work together as a nation to very real problems that we have. Donna is, one of her doctors has said no. One says it's the only chance she has. Her number, I don't understand how they arrive at it, but her number is now at 29. They don't like to do what they're fixing to do above a 27. That's your liver functioning number. One doctor, the one here, says no. Wants to put her in the hospital, try to get the fluid off of her, try to keep things. The other doctor said it's the only chance. So I don't know what to pray for. The only thing I know to do is give it up to God and let Him decide. And they're getting together tomorrow. As of now, it's still on for Friday. We don't know what time. They're going to call us the night before. If it's still on, don't cancel it. Both her doctors are talking even probably as we speak tonight. So I don't really know what's going to happen. I don't know what percentage of chances that this is 50-50. I don't know what it is right now. So be in prayer for her. She's got to talk to both of them tomorrow again to make decisions. And
So the transplant is the liver.
There's not one available. I don't know if she's at the top of the list right now with all her other health problems. The procedure, if successful, will give her more time to wait for a liver. Right now, she can barely move.
Propane or just
Both. If you saw Sunday, if you know, yes, her legs are absolutely huge. Because of fluid that's in them, she can barely get up. I had to give her special to get up and off the bed and down off the bed. And she has trouble getting out of her trailer. It's that bad. And she's miserable.
Yeah.
And she wants that to stop. It's a pretty bad situation. She's really going downhill.
My friend's brother is now 100% bed and dialysis, 24-hour dialysis. So he's not doing well either.
If this helps, Donna was, after her first cancer scare, on dialysis 3 times a week, which is not near what your friend is going through. But she was. She had to go 3 times a week for dialysis. Somehow, when she got sick 2 years ago, that went away.
When they
Kidney
got her to the
started functioning
hospital,
again.
they said it won't get better, and it did.
Mhm.
And, I had dialysis in ICU.
Yeah.
Didn't know to care. I mean, I knew the machine, but I didn't know the process and, you know, they can pray.
Hers was so bad, she had to go to the hospital for it every now and then. She'd rather go to Fuller to DeVita, the dialysis center. But many times she had to go to the hospital.
Well, I didn't have to do it. I told them to take the temporary out. And they said, but it won't get better, and it did.
Mhm.
And I feel like it was prayer simply.
She's got cured for cancer, she's got cured from this, so I'm hoping that this is what God wants for her to be better. And if it needs this procedure Friday, it needs this procedure Friday. It's such a, if it works, she can still probably go home that night, it probably let her, but she probably could. If it doesn't work, no. Think about that. Because if it doesn't work, it starts to bleed, she's done.
It does. Well, and how are you're gonna let people know?
By phone call.
Okay.
But it's on my calls if I can. If I can't, I may text it. If it has a text to voice feature on it, I may do that. Whatever I can do, I will. And I have done my calls on my phone, so I can do it
Yeah,
that way.
well,
All right, we'll see you Sunday.
Lord willing. That's my New Year's resolution.
Always say Lord willing.
Well, try to remember that anyway.
No.
Good night.